Good morning. James R. Lee Jr. here with the Fetro team of Real Broker LLC. And today we're going to talk about the Texas Realtors General Information and Notice to Buyers and Sellers. So we're going to go over this document's pretty much just a definitions page, kind of gives you a better overview of some of the things that we're going to run into as we go through the process of buying and selling. And so this one, we'll just kind of go through the definitions. So first one in there is annexation. It says if a property is outside of the limits of this municipality. So that's just an update saying that there are properties that are outside of a municipality. I can't talk today. Municipality or a city, and that they could be annexed over time. And so what that means is that the city could expand to include that address at a later point. So appraisal is a valuation of a property. It's done by an appraiser that's hired by the bank, by the buyer or seller through a bank, usually. But they render an estimate of the value as of certain date under assumptions and conditions stated in the appraisal report. Typically, the buyer's lender requires an appraisal to verify that the loan is secured by property that is worth a certain amount, and the appraisal is not the same as an inspection, definitely. So, brokers, the real estate brokers represent a party, buyer or seller, in a real estate transaction and may act as an intermediary between the parties. We talked about that in the previous video. But basically, it puts a fiduciary responsibility on me as the real estate agent under a broker's authority to represent either the buyer or seller and have their interest be the most important thing. But that's kind of a broad definition of that. Compensation means any commission or fee or valuable consideration for real estate brokerage services provided by a broker or an agent. Broker compensation or the sharing of compensation between brokers is not set by law nor fixed, controlled, recommended, or suggested by the Association of Realtors, MLS, or any other listing source. Broker compensation is fully negotiable. I want to highlight that it's fully negotiable. But you are hiring a real estate agent for their expertise and experience and what they're going to do for you. And as part of that negotiation, a lower fee may cause the real estate agent not to be able to provide some services to you. But again, it's all negotiable. So, environmental concerns. So in here we have general. It says over the years, the market has identified environmental conditions that buyers should know may exist. Environmental hazards include, but are not limited to, conditions such as asbestos, lead-based paint, mold, pesticides, radon gas, toxic waste, underground storage tanks, urea, formaldehyde, insulation, and the other pollutants. Wetlands and endangered species on the property may restrict the use of the property as well. Environmental inspections. If the buyer is concerned that environmental hazards, wetlands, or endangered species may be present on the property, the buyer should hire a qualified expert to inspect the property for such items. Lead-based paint. There's another document that goes along with the lead-based paint for the seller to disclose their knowledge of any lead-based paint being in the property. There's another document for mold as well. It said it is uncommon to find mold spores in a property. The concerns about mold increases when there are large amounts of mold found in the property. Texas Department of Insurance publishes a document titled Protect Your Home for Mold, which discloses mold in more detail. Oak wilt and diseased trees. There are diseases such as oak wilt and other conditions that may affect the property. And so those are things that you want to be aware of. They also include noise. Surrounding properties are used for a variety of purposes. Some of the uses cause noise. For example, airports, railways, highways, restaurants, bars, schools, and arenas, and construction. So the buyer is encouraged to drive to review the area with the property at various times during the day to make sure that you fully understand what the noise concern would be around your property as well. One of the things, they've got a lot of apartments over there going in McKinney by the new amphitheater that they're putting in. And so I'm sure they're taking that into consideration, but the apartments are already there. So we'll see. Expansive soils. It's Texas. The soil is a little bit different. So it's a lot of clay, a lot of movement. But it says soil conditions vary greatly throughout Texas. Many soils will move, some more than others. The movement will many times affect the foundation of the homes and buildings and may cause cracks to appear in walls and other parts of the building. Additionally, if a property is newly constructed, the concrete curing process may also cause the foundation of the building to move. Seasonal changes in the moisture in the soil may also cause foundations to move. The buyer should check with an inspector and other experts on preventative measures to minimize the risk of such movement. Some of those things would be having a weep hose about a foot away from your foundation all the way around that you can use year round to keep the soil moist but not over wet. But there's a lot of things that you can do from that. And just because you see evidence of a foundation issue doesn't mean that there's a foundation problem. It could be something that's already been repaired, and they just didn't fix the cosmetic pieces of it too. So lots of things to look at from an inspector standpoint and from a real estate agent perspective as well to be able to assist you in that process. FIRPTA, the Foreign Investment in Real Estate Tax Act of 1980, may require buyers in certain transactions involving a seller who qualifies as a foreign person to withhold up to 15% of the amount realized by the seller for federal taxes. A foreign person is defined as a non-resident alien individual, foreign corporation that is not an election under Section 897I of the Internal Revenue Code to be treated as a domestic corporation, or 3, foreign partnership, trust, or estate. The definitions does not include a resident alien individual. A seller should notify the buyer whether the seller is a foreign person as defined under federal law. If the seller is unsure whether he is or she qualifies as a foreign person, the seller should consult a tax professional or an attorney. So just be aware of that. There are some things that you want to take into consideration if they do have a quote unquote foreign person on either side of the transaction. And so you want to consult the appropriate people for that. Flood hazards, floodways, and flood insurance. So this property that you're either purchasing or selling may be in a floodplain, whether that's 100-year, 500-year. There's a lot of different ones, but you want to know what's involved in this property. And they could change down the road as well. So something to be aware of. But many properties are in flood hazard areas. Lenders who make loans on properties located in such flood hazard areas typically require the owner to maintain flood insurance. Additionally, some properties may lie in the floodway. Texas Realtors publish a form titled Information About Special Flood Hazards, which discusses flood hazard areas and floodways in more detail. Buyers encouraged to buy flood insurance regardless of whether the property is in a high, moderate, or low risk of flooding area. So just something to keep in mind as well from an insurance standpoint and from a hazard to your house standpoint. So historic or conservation district. Properties located in historic or conservation districts may have restrictions of use. They may have restrictions on the architectural style, what you do to maintain the house. So there's a lot of things that go into that you want to be aware of. So do your research and get a good real estate agent who knows a little bit about that to help you walk through that process if you are buying in a historic or conservation district. Inspections, repairs, and walkthroughs. So inspections, I highly recommend every time you purchase a house that you have it inspected, just because they are a third-party person who's trained by the state to be able to come in and look at the house that is up to, make sure that things are up to code and make sure that things are the way they're supposed to be. But it's really, they're going to give you the whole picture of the house. Now, if the house was built in 1980, they're working off of what today's codes are. So unless you're going to make changes to that, you don't have to bring the house up to code in order to purchase it. But if you are going to make some changes, then you would need to bring it up to code. So those are things to take into consideration and things that you can negotiate for having the seller make the repairs in advance or a specific dollar amount to assist you with making some changes as necessary. So repairs, the buyer and seller should resolve in writing an obligation and any timing of the obligation to complete repairs the buyer may request before the option period expires. So as part of that, in Texas, you purchase an option period. So that's between 1 and 10 days. It can be longer, it can be shorter. Just typically what we see in this market is between 1 and 10 days. And what you're purchasing is the unfettered right to terminate the contract for any reason that you want, based off of the inspection that you do or further investigation that you do personally. And so, as part of that, if you say we purchased 7 day option period at 5 p.m. on that seventh day, you have up until that point to terminate the contract and get your earnest money back. But if you're able to negotiate those repairs, then you put that into the repair amendment, whatever you're going to do, or the money amount that you're going to get back. And so, but that all has to work in that time frame, and we want to negotiate it in advance. And so, just make sure that we get that done, and give yourself enough time to get the inspection and do the review with your agent as you go through the process. So. And then walkthrough. Before the close of the sale, the buyer should walk through the property and verify if any repairs are complete. In the condition of the property does not satisfy the contractual provisions, the buyer should notify the buyer's agent before closing. So always do a final walkthrough. You want to make sure, even if you didn't negotiate any repairs, you want to make sure that the house is still in the same condition it was when you viewed it and fell in love with it the first time. But make sure that you do that. And then if there is something wrong, you need to make sure and get in touch with the other agents and the buyer or seller to make sure that things are the way they need to be before you sign that contract and close on the property. Mandatory Owners Association is an owners association may require a property owner to be a member. The buyer may obtain subdivision information as part of the buying process. And then that's typically a fee to get that information from the actual homeowners association or property owners association. And you have a time frame to review that as part of the contract and make sure that you're comfortable with whatever restrictions they have on that property. So, mineral interest in the Metroplex in DFW, typically the mineral rights don't transfer with the property. If you are interested in the mineral rights, you need to make sure that you hire a landman to be able to do the investigation and find out who actually owns the mineral rights and whether they are able to transfer them or not. So, but just don't take into consideration that because you're buying the property, you're getting the mineral rights. That's a separate piece, and it is a lot more involved from a landman standpoint to be able to make sure that those transfer with you if you want them. So, but be aware that in most of the places that you're going to be buying in the Metroplex, that's not going to be an option. So, but if you're interested in it, there is some things that you need to do to make sure that you're up to speed with that. Multiple listing service, or MLS, that's what we use as a real estate agent to put houses for sale, but also to do some research and find the right house for you to go look at. But it's a database and a cooperative tool between brokers. Agents who use the MLS must comply with the MLS rules. The listing agent is required to timely report the current status of listings, including when a property is sold, leased, or no longer available. And so it's just a tool that we use to be able to help find the right home for you or help you sell your home if that's what we're doing. So permits may be required to construct, alter, repair, or improve the property. The buyer is encouraged to contact the local government to verify that all required permits have been obtained as part of the impact for future plans of the property. So they're contact your local authority, your city, and your county to find out when a permit is required, and then you can find out if the permits were actually pulled for any renovations or updates that were done to the house that you're interested in. Possession. So that's when do you take possession of the house? When do you actually get to move in? When do you actually own the house? And that is when you sign the contract and it closes and funds. Is typically when you will get the possession of the house. But there are also short-term temporary leasebacks that take into effect if the seller needs some more time to move out. They may negotiate that as part of the contract. And then there's also a buyer's leaseback where sometimes they can lease the property before they actually move into it. That's a lot less common in what I've seen, but it is an option out there. So, but possession is when do you take possession of the house, and that could be at closing and after funding, or it could be as part of a leaseback that's negotiated as part of the contract. Property insurance, property after promptly after entering into a contract to buy a property and before an option period expires, the buyer should contact an insurance agent to determine the availability and affordability of insurance for this particular property. They can also run what's called a clue report, which will tell you if there's have been any insurance claims filed on the property in the last 5 years. So some great tools there, but you do want to make sure that the property is insurable. And if there's some things that the insurance would require, that's something that you can negotiate as part of your option period. So property values, the real estate market is cyclical and current property values may fluctuate. Brokers and agents cannot guarantee desired future market conditions or property values. The ultimate decision on the price and terms a buyer is willing to buy and a seller is willing to sell for the specific property rests solely with the buyer and seller. So just be aware of that, and it is something that can change, and hopefully it goes up, but that's not always the case. So make sure you understand that. Residential service contracts, also known as a home warranty, but those are things that can be bought and they can be negotiated as part of the contract. They usually put in there a dollar amount that the buyer is requesting from the seller, or the seller is offering to the buyer as part of a home warranty contract that will be purchased at closing. But you can also purchase one outside of closing as well if you want to do that. So, but those want to make sure that when you look at those, that you see what the coverage actually is and what they're actually going to warranty before you make that decision. So. Restrictions on properties near the international border. Just be aware that there's certain counties located near an international border where the Texas law may prohibit the sale of a property lacking required water and sewer services. So there's some regulations behind that. So if you're buying a property that's near an international border, you want to make sure that you dig into that and understand what it is that you're trying to buy before you do it. School boundaries, again, they fluctuate. And so just want to make sure that you know what the current boundaries are when you're buying the house, and then if keeping up with local politics and things that are going on to make sure that you understand as they progress that they could change and be altered. So, but you want to know what the current boundaries are when you purchase the house. Septic tanks and on-site sewer facilities. So those are mostly in more rural areas or larger properties where you find a 1 acre or more. But those are, instead of having a city sewer system, you would have an on-site sewer septic system. And you want to make sure that you know that and know how it operates and know how you need to maintain it. So sexual offenders and criminal activity gives a website here for you to be able to do the research. As a realtor, I can't provide that information to you. I can give you the website and you can do the research to determine if you have concerns in the area that we're looking regarding a sexual offender or a criminal activity. Square footage is the purchase price is based on the size of the property's building and structures. The buyer should have the information the buyer receives about the square footage independently verified. Square footage information comes from other sources such as appraisal districts, appraisers, builders. Such information is only an estimate. The actual square footage may vary. And you should get that information as part of an appraisal during the process, but the MLS system will also dictate or tell you where they gather that information from, whether that's public records or some other thing. So statutory tax districts, the property may be located in a utility or other statutory created district providing water, sewer, drainage, or flood control facilities and services. For example, a municipal utility district or MUD, water improvement district or WID, or public improvement district, PID. So there's different taxing authorities. So when they're building a lot of new construction, those types of things, if the city can't keep up with getting that out there, they create these additional taxing districts to actually help pay for that and move it along a little bit faster. So be aware if you're purchasing in one of those areas that there's an additional tax that you'll be responsible for. Surveillance, be aware that when viewing a property, a seller might be recording or otherwise electronically monitoring a buyer without the buyer's knowledge or consent, and a buyer might photograph or otherwise record the property without seller's knowledge or consent. The party should consult an attorney before recording or photographing another person or property. That's also something that's in the MLS, that there's a place in there that says whether the seller is okay with people taking pictures or videos in the home. So something you can gather from your real estate agent. Survey. The survey identifies the location of boundaries, major improvements, fence lines, drives, encroachments, easements, and other items on the property. The buyer should obtain a survey early enough in the transaction to help the buyer identify any encroachments, encumbrances, or to title or restrictions. The contract will typically contain a provision which identifies who is responsible for providing the survey and the right to object to encumbrances to title disclose the survey. So that is something that will be it's usually a one-page document, and it shows the boundaries of the property. It shows where the house sits, any other buildings that sit on there, the pool, anything like that. And you will get that and have an amount of time to review it. And if for some reason title or the lender requests a new survey, that's part of the negotiation too, is who's going to be responsible for paying that, whether it be the buyer or the seller. But those are all things that are negotiated in the contract. So synthetic stucco, just something to be aware of, that there was previously something called an EIFS. That was a sighting that was a synthetic stucco that was causing some damage. And so you may need to investigate whether or not this house contains that or not. Tax prorations. So typically you're not buying it on the 1st of January or the December 31st. And so as part of that, based off of when the closing actually takes place, title will help you prorate taxes. And so the seller will pay the amount of taxes that for when they had possession of the house, and then you pay your portion for when you have possession of the house. So, but that's all taken care of at title as well. Termination option. So most contracts forms contain an option clause. That's what we talked about a minute ago, the option period. And that's where you're buying that unfettered right to terminate the contract for any reason, to give you time to do inspections and evaluate the house a little bit further before you make the decision on whether you want to purchase it, and then negotiate any repairs or amount of money in lieu of repairs for that particular house. So Tidewaters is specifically associated with a VA loan. In most cases, it says that the property adjoins any of the state's Tidewaters. The seller will provide. My bad. This is actually different than what that Tidewater for a VA loan is. So sorry about that. If the property adjoins any of the state's Tidewaters, the seller will provide the buyer with a prescribed notice titled Addendum for Coastal Area Notices, boundaries of the property along which waters may change and building restrictions will apply if the property is located seaward of the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway. So it's another document that they provide regarding the Tidewaters as well. So title insurance or abstract of title. The buyer should obtain a title insurance policy, and that's partly negotiated in the contract as well, whether the seller's going to pay for it or the buyer's going to pay for it, or maybe they divide it. But that's all a negotiation. But it's what protects the new owner from any title concerns or issues or blemishes that may be on the title as it transfers. So utilities is the buyer should evaluate what utilities the buyer will require and check to make sure the utilities are available in the area, suit the buyer's needs. So that could be electricity, water, gas, internet, all those kinds of things. You want to make sure that you know what you're buying, what you're going to be responsible for as part of that. Water level fluctuations. State law requires the seller to notify the buyer of a property that adjoins a lake, reservoir, or other impoundment of water with a storage capacity of at least 5,000 acre feet at its normal operating level. The water level may fluctuate. The buyer or seller can find a list of lakes and reservoirs with at least 5,000 foot acreage storage capacity by accessing that website. Water wells. If the property has a water well, the buyer should have, and the lender may require, the equipment inspected and water tested. The buyer should also determine if the county requires any registration or other action to begin under the water well. And then wire fraud, we're going to cover again in another document as well. But you just want to make sure you know where your money's going or where it's coming from as part of the process. Make sure that there's a defined process on when you get the information where the money's going to and the time of it and the cost of it. And so just make sure that you're doing your due diligence, because there's a lot of wire fraud that takes place out there. People trying to get your money and take it away from you and not use it for what you want it to use for. So, and then at the bottom, we have the signature line for in this case, the buyer or the seller in the other document, and then the real estate agent that's involved. So pretty cut and dry. It's just basically a list of definitions, but I hope that helps you have a better understanding of what you're going to be doing as part of the transaction to purchase or sell a new house. So again, love to hit like and subscribe if you would like to see further videos, and then also send me a comment if there's something in particular that you want me to do a video about. But that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you on the next video.